We're excited for today. We're excited for the event. There's a lot of things going on in the world we'll touch on, but before I do, want to introduce my co-host Lulu. Lulu, how you doing today?
Kobe, everything is good. I got a question for you today.
Okay.
What's your thoughts on the vaccine? Are you going to be getting poked?
I guess I'll admit this publicly. I kind of low key am gonna get the vaccine and then not tell certain people in my life that I'm vaxxed. That's how I feel about it. So I can just kind of like use that card later. But the fact that I just said it on this, I might edit it out and then repost it on YouTube.
Kobe
Yeah.
is an extrovert, but an introvert at the same time.
The people that know me know that very well. Yeah, so today, really excited about this episode. We have a person that I have known for almost 7 years, kind of a legend in the concentrate making space. And this whole series is about highlighting people that have successfully flipped it from the underground and made it over to the regulated market and somehow are paying taxes on it. Really excited about it. But before I do, I just want to shout out the people that have joined in the Zoom webinar. You guys can chat us, ask questions as we go, but also shout out to the people that are on YouTube watching the live stream or watching this later. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, like it, do all that jazz. All right, so let's get into it. Senor Kind Bill, would you mind joining us? What's up, bro?
Hey, Jacoby. Hi, Lulu.
Hey, Bill. Thank you.
How was everybody tonight?
Really excited to hear your story. On the concentrate side, and always just super excited to hear from folks that have been, the innovators. You're the inventor of live resin and flash frozen. So super stoked to hear your story.
Yeah, so glad to be here and get to share.
Yeah. Before we hop into your story, Bill, and I really want to learn more about it. I do want to take a minute to just talk about what's going on in the world. We always do this segment. We normally have Peter join us and do this. He couldn't join us today because doing the family thing. So I'm going to do my best. And there's one story I want to talk about specifically. There's a couple weighing heavy on my heart that have happened in the last week or so. But this one specifically, it happened a couple weeks ago. This gentleman named Corvain Cooper, and he has a very powerful story. And if you haven't heard about it, I'm gonna just give it a quick overview. He basically was locked up in 2013 for life without parole. The typical 3 strikes bullshit. He was in prison in Louisiana, I think, in 2013. And I just think about the timeline of marijuana legalization and how this all happened. 2012, I think legalization passed in Colorado. In 2014, it was operational. And he went in right as this real transition was happening. 7 years, if I'm doing my math right, 7, 8 years, he's locked up. And thanks to a lot of advocates and people working on his behalf that didn't give up, especially this group 40 Tons, shout out to them. He was granted clemency by the last administration on their way out. So he kind of, he said it's better than the lottery if you go watch his video. So he got out, but 7 years is no joke.
A 7-year sentence, man. You're not the same human. You never are back to there. People talk about a new normal after a year of a COVID lockdown. Imagine every facet of your life being controlled for 7 years and being told you're never going to matter again, and then trying to reintegrate and reassemble and show up in your community. And everybody's looking at the guy too. So it's near and dear to my heart as well. I wish him the best. And I know there's some opportunity to get some help out there for him too. And yeah, that's kind of something that's a big deal about equity. Is it's got to start with getting these guys out of prison. And we'll get into that more, I'm sure. Yeah, but that's something that's been spinning through my head since we opened this equity conversation, for sure. It really starts with the guys and girls that are still doing time.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited to get into your story and your perspective on this. Before I do, I'll just say that there's a GoFundMe for Corvain, and he got out. He went back to his old neighborhood, right? He has 2 kids before he went in, so he's now trying to get up and get out of that area. So the GoFundMe is to support his integration back in, and I can't imagine what he's going through. To your point, like, he's vocal. He's talking all the time about what's going on. He went from 0 to 60, like really being an advocate. So we'll share the link in the webinar and on the YouTube if people want to go support him and in this journey. And honestly, I read somewhere else that there's still 40,000 people that are in prison for cannabis related offenses. And we talk about the business of cannabis all the time, but we can't communicate about it without talking about the real life impact of people right now.
Absolutely.
All right, so I'm going to switch it up. Shout out to Corvain, shout out to 40 Tons and the Last Prisoner Project. Now let's talk about the legend of Kind Bill. You have a pretty interesting story, dude. So I've known you. I got to know you 7 years ago when I got my first job in legal weed. And I just saw this guy go into our back corner of the lab, and he was just super particular about every single thing that came out of that lab. As I got to know him, I realized that it is the legend of Kind Bill. Before we get into that and how you mastered your craft, how about you just break it down on how did you even get started? What started you on this journey? It was clearly before legalization.
Sure. All the way back to the first time that I consumed cannabis, that there was an effect. Pretty much been a central point in my life. Really, not that I'm an advocate for super young use, but single mom, going through all the stuff. And I was out there smoking weed when I was 13 and fell in love with it. And then I tried to grow some weed a couple times when I was 15, and I'm a go after something that I want to figure out kind of guy. One thing led to another, and I kind of fell in the hands of some guys that were smugglers and fairly decent scale growers in South Florida. And I lied about how old I was and kind of ran away to join the circus. So I say, and that's kind of where it started, really at a crazy scale for a kid. Something unique about youth, right, is you could really be 10 feet underwater and think that you have water around your ankles. But yeah, so that was kind of the beginning of it. I guess to back up, both my parents are academics at a pretty decent level and perfectionists in their own crafts. And I'm fortunate enough to be in a discussion about what the good is from an early age. Then that first group that I was with, my mentor was, obsessive compulsively perfectionist on the level of insane. And that may be necessary to not be robbed, arrested, go to jail as a smuggler and through the 70s, 80s, 90s, as was his case. So
this is in Florida?
Southwest Florida.
What year is this?
I met those guys in 1987. I met there were 2 brothers, and I met the younger brother, and that's an entire story of itself. But nevertheless, he hadn't really met a young guy with the kind of go-to that I had, and I was pretty excitable and enthusiastic, as I'm known for, but maybe on 100x, right? And me and him started kicking around. And about 9 months into knowing him, he like took me to a hotel where he brought his brother. I had a 2-hour conversation with him. He'd been growing at scale in both Jamaica, Canada, and Florida outdoor for over a decade, but had never grown indoor, nor had I, mind you. But I'd read some books, and I had a good conversation with him. And they're like, we want you to come and build out this indoor grow for us, and put a blindfold on me and put me in the back of the car.
So you're 16. Had you grown weed at all?
Little bits, like, in the outside the window still of my mom's, and like on the side of a pond, but I never pulled anything off. I never got any weed out of it. But I'd read everything that was in print a few times at that point, including all of the catalogs and everything for all the equipment. So I was really well versed with the language of the industry, and then the biology side of everything that was available written.
Okay.
And the dude was blown away. He, I was 16. He completely believed that I was 19, or maybe didn't care. But I went out there, and that's where it started. I didn't leave the property for 6 months.
Damn.
And I didn't know where that place was until I went out of there in the back of a police car.
Really? I thought you had been doing it for a little bit longer before.
Years and years, but I always went in and out on a blindfold. That's how tight it was. People don't understand. It's like,
Oh, wow.
in California, you could maybe tell people that you were growing weed at this time. But man, you get life in prison in Florida for 30 plants.
Yeah, it's no
We
joke.
had thousands at times, so April 12th, 1991, I had just gotten done having my lunch. I was having a smoke on the deck and heard a helicopter, and knew the second that I heard it that everything that I knew before was going to have a new reference point. And going forward, there was going to be an intersection in time where I reference everything, and that I was about to relearn everything. I just knew how low that helicopter was. That bad things were about to happen.
So you were like 26, 25?
No, I was 21, not even 20. Yeah.
Okay, so you've been doing it for like 3 or 4 years.
3.5 years out there about. Probably the last year and a half before got busted. A lot we were making some oil in Jamaica and smuggling it, and that was kind of this group's gig previous, but there had been some trouble down there, and they had been kind of just their version of lying low was, growing 1,000 pounds of weed a year or something in the swamps.
So they went from smuggling to growing.
Yeah.
That's
And then
really,
and then started tiptoeing back into the smuggling.
Okay.
Yeah. And then
Okay, so what happened after you saw that helicopter? Like,
so a lot, man. I had plants both indoors and outdoors, and I immediately went into like damage control. I knew they were coming, but I like tried to close the doors on all the outside buildings and knock down plants that they maybe wouldn't have seen yet. And I had thousands of seedlings that were up, that I kicked all those trays and ditched them, and like, phone records, whatever. But it turned into about a 9.5 hour kind of standoff of helicopter on me and SWAT team around the property.
Holy shit.
They didn't have a search warrant, so I wouldn't let them in. And they were threatening to kill my dogs, and very normal South Florida police handling, long-haired kid looking like a hippie out there. And eventually they're like, we're killing the dogs if you don't let us in. So I told them that I would climb over the fence and surrender. if they didn't shoot my dogs. So probably, 9-10 hours into the thing, I climbed over the fence and then was taken away to the sheriff's department while they try to get a warrant and figure out what they're going to do out there.
Shit. Okay. This is a lot, actually.
It's a lot.
We've talked about this before this show, and I'm still getting more out of it. This is crazy. So helicopters come, you're in a standoff for a while, right? And then all the processing and shit happens. So what ended up being the result or the penalty or the situation that came from that?
So long, drawn out thing. At the end of it, I ended up serving about 4.5 years in, and another that on parole, a controlled release. That was pretty stringent, man. I had 4,000 hours of community service originally. I had, to be in therapy. I had to be in school. I had to be report like 6-year analysis a month. They were on me. They did not want me to get off parole for sure.
Yeah.
And about 2/3 of the way through that, my parole officer actually pulled me in, and he and I were definitely in conflict. And he was like, "Hey, you have family in Colorado. You should probably move there if you'd like to get off parole." And they kind of invited me to leave Florida. And I
fuck yeah.
I complied for sure, man. I got enrolled in school here in Colorado and came home.
So when was this? What time?
So that was 97. I did my last year of parole here.
Okay.
I got off October of 98.
All right. So you put in the time, man, both pushing serious weight way before this whole legalization craze. You had to serve time for 4+ years, then parole, and parole alone, the way you explained it, sounded like it was really strict in Florida, at least. I don't know, it was like in Colorado.
Yeah, it was not a thing here in Colorado, but in Florida, my particular parole officer did not prefer me, and was looking to catch me, and I could be a little smart ass, a little bit, especially when I know I'm doing it right. You know what I mean? And a little flaunting, and but little things that I knew, because I was a little, it breaks you when they lock you up when you're that young a little bit. And so you're bucking in every way that you can on the line, kind of. And so I knew that I could smoke weed on the way to a drug test and it would never be in my pee. But then I had to start flushing right away in case they're going to test me again. But I'll frequently go in there to do my drug test smelling like weed and just smiling at him. And he would just be, I'm sure, wanting to, kill me.
Damn, dude, you're playing with fire. You made it out.
Not the way to be. Not the way to be. But that's kind of what happens when you're under somebody's thumb, is that you tend to want to poke them in the eye if you get a chance.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to get the chip off my shoulder and just want to reintegrate and like be a normal guy that wasn't mad all the time. That's a rebuild process, right? And I was fortunate enough while doing time to like to read, and that to be my escape mechanism. A lot of people work out, play cards, whatever. But man, I just devoured everything I could read. And I have just shy of 1,000 books throughout the whole ordeal.
Wow.
Maybe like 300 novels and a lot of trash, but just whatever is around, I read it all. And then doing federal time, being articulate, there's a lot of smart guys in there. So I learned the commodities futures business and came out wanting to do that, and just they wouldn't let me, but I got a financial education and made it count. And that's what I tell, if I talk to anybody that's going in or is in, that you're going to be mad and it sucks, but however you have to survive in there, make it count. Somehow learn something, even if it's about yourself, right? Some book that I read along the way is super pertinent, I think, to today. And I don't remember the book. I just remember this line from it, but it said, no man has any measure of his freedom unless he can see the bars of his own cage. And the implication is that we're trapped by our ideas long before you could ever put chains on somebody. And so I was as free as I've ever been in prison, ever, because I was able to just double down on reading and not let them turn me into killer, savage, whatever thing that machine is built to turn people into.
That's a crazy bar right there. Can you say that again?
So no man has any measure of his freedom unless he can see the bars of his own cage. And it was in a weird sci-fi novel I can't remember the name of that I pulled this out of, but I was like, wow, that's super profound, right? Because everybody's trapped up by their own ideas of normal and good and bad and whatever, right? And the deal is to like dig down on what your bars are and try to suck a little less, a little sooner, like I always say.
I'm about to have some serious reflection on my life later tonight off of that one. I'm gonna switch it up. Let's take that. This is your journey, right? Even before you even got to Colorado. And thankfully you had opportunity, you had family, you got a shot to come out here. I just know from research that this is where you really start to get into, I'll call it legal, but it's kind of like a spectrum where you went from like the black market to the dark gray market to the gray market. And this is the gray market phase.
Sure.
You talk to me what's going on in Colorado and how did you even get involved in that?
So like, at that time in Colorado, especially I lived in Boulder County in all the little mountain towns outside of Boulder County, kind of floating around. And, that area code on your phone number basically means you're a weed grower in 1998, 99, 2000. And so I started helping people out with their grows and getting into the community a little bit, and then also getting on the online community. And the more seasoned growers know when they're talking to somebody that knows about growing cannabis, and especially that's ever done it in any kind of scale, that's run numbers or seen weight or whatever. When you talk to someone who's not full of shit. And that I fell into some little private board groups and behind the scenes, and people started sending me clones that were pretty held, and I started trading clones and just being involved in that online community. And I've made some of the best friends of my life through those boards that I still do business with today in the legal market. It's kind of cool. A couple of us transferred through and have remained pretty relevant.
Was this legal? Like, were you worried about where you came, like going back to this?
No, this is like early medical or even before. I think medical passed in 2002 in Colorado. So around that timeline, probably before I ever posted a picture on an online forum, definitely would have been legal, medical at least. And that was terrifying for me, man, to even go on there first and read it. I was like, for sure, the cops were going to be like, okay, we got one. This is one of the real ones. Because at that point, man, me getting pulled over for a speeding ticket involved guns and my car getting torn apart And when I was still that close to my charge, every law enforcement interaction was extremely negative. You know, for example, in '98, I was in a party in Lakewood. They were smoking weed. I was not. And somebody called the cops. The cops come ask everybody for their ID. They run them. They immediately separate me from the group. Now there are 3 cops with me in the bedroom, you know, and they got everybody else trying to get them to say that I was the one that brought pot there. So whatever. I was terrified to do any of those things, but kind of tiptoed in and was immediately accepted. I'd never gotten to show anybody weed that I grew or talked about it with another grower before then. It was crazy.
Well, Bill, just talk to me about the mindset here. Like, what even compelled you to mess around with this gray area of legalization after everything you had already gone through? Like, what was it that drew you into that risk?
I couldn't not do it, man. To be honest, as young as I was coming into cannabis, the ability to go into an office and, you know, I perform high and it not be just a soul crushing experience for me is a huge challenge. And so I attempted to work in the mortgage industry off and on for years, and I was highly successful, but like I'd make a little bit of money and then not want to work and go then like want to travel and see shows and like, you know, be like a weed grower. And because it was a lifestyle of freedom that drove me into this, and then I got addicted to growing plants, and it definitely was, oh, there's a freedom thing there that was most attractive to me, which it's really not. You're tied to plants, right? It's a different kind of freedom. Make your own rules and stuff, but you definitely have a job every day of the year. Yeah, really hard to you know, report to somebody that I may or may not feel that it is my intellectual equal who might or might not understand me. So I couldn't not do it. And it was funny because in my previous marriage, the day I got married, I said to one of the people in the wedding party, I was like, man, she's never going to let me grow weed. And he looked at me and he was like, this is a bad idea. Like at my wedding. Like at the reception, I realized, holy shit, I'm not going to get to grow weed again. And we were in fact divorced in 11 months, and I was fully growing weed full time from that minute on. Like even the idea that I could never do it again probably was like the spear in that one.
Yeah, that got you. That got you. That mindset.
It did. I was like, oh no, that would be terrible.
All right.
Yeah, then I started diving in.
Okay, so let's talk about how you've honed your craft now. So what I think is interesting now is you're kind of in these message boards. You're a grower that has actually done this at scale, probably more than most people you're talking to in the early days. But you have been able to figure out everything on your own, which I think is quite different than like if I want to start a grow today, I can Google search and find 50 consultants that have a resume that can show me what they're going to get per light, all this shit. And, you know, I can fork over way too much money and be set. I don't think that was possible for you. So how the hell, like, how do you figure it out?
That's the hardest thing for me in the switch over into legal was not being able to understand why people couldn't figure things out first. And then back to that, like, so you can't ask anybody for help, right? And particularly in Florida, the risk of law enforcement super high, but the maybe higher risk is some organized crime or loosely organized group that they just are in the job of robbing drug dealers, and you get killed by them. They don't come and like just take your stuff, they kill you. So the security is really high on everything. So you literally might have a broken piece or a missing part of a thing that you don't know what it's called. You have to go to the hardware store and wander around with the thing in your head and then build the solution. And it might take 3 hours, it might take 20 minutes, but you literally don't know and can't ask and just have to figure it out. And it's plumbing, electrical, security, irrigation, agriculture, pesticides, everything. Like we got these nematodes in the ground there in Florida. And we were like, couldn't figure it out. We had to grow tomatoes in the soil and take it to the ag extension to figure out what was going on. But that also took some figuring out. We're like, how can we know what's going on in our soil? And then we figured out we had a nematode. We couldn't use the native soil there without baking it. So,
but I think that's what kind of sets people like yourself apart, because there was no resource for you to figure it out, right? Like you literally just had to persist. Like you'd be wrong, it'd be wrong, and it's like, I gotta figure this damn thing out, right? These things are killing my plants. I have to figure it out. And there's no savior. There's nobody that's gonna come like give you the answer. And I think that's why some people from the underground like yourself can build such a great knowledge base of all the diversity of elements to grow good weed. Like you mentioned, it's so vast. And I think that's what makes you guys so good, is because you had to figure it out. Once you figured it out that one time, I'm sure it's stuck. It's not like you're going to forget that again, because you had to spend so much energy to figure it out.
Right. And the stakes are real, like your life and freedom are at stake all the time. Right. So at least for me, it mattered very much that maximum return on every amount of effort. Right. Because of the exposure. So I was always like, well, if you could grow the same amount of weed, but get twice as much money for it, you'd better be able to get twice as much money for it. You put that work in, you grow the best thing. It would be stupid to grow anything that isn't the very best thing ever. And that stuck through with me, obviously, that nothing's good enough, but the pursuit for a thing to be the best thing.
Okay. So I have a question from the audience here. It's actually multiple questions. So I'm going to pick apart one of them. They asked, what are the best clones in Colorado, which I think is too vast for you to answer. What I do want to answer is, how did you find the best quality in Colorado? Let's just say in that 2002 to 2012 time. Where'd you get them?
So I was in a back room on a message board that there was a group of guys all over the country / world openly trading the most elite cuts on the planet. At that time, Colorado, there might have been a couple, maybe one or two other people with an OG plant here. There might have been. Chem has been here. Chem Weed has been here because Chem Dog did a glass apprenticeship in Boulder. But so the things started coming to me. And then when the med scene opened up and there were some dispensaries, I hit up some of these guys that I got these clones from and was like, hey man, I'm gonna sell them for $10 a piece to patients. And they're like, whew, I don't know about that. Not that they cared, but they're like, man, you're gonna break yourself. That isn't how you control the market there, buddy. You got something. And I was like, yeah, but people deserve to have the best weed. I give their best shot at growing it. And I don't think they're gonna beat me. And if they do, they haven't beat me, then they leg me up, because then I get to learn and level up. You know what I mean? So like there's no losing and sharing this. And man, that act was not purposeful for anything other than that. but it has served me very well. There have been several times through this industry where I would have been out. They weren't going to let me play. And one of those guys that I brought a tray of clones to made sure I got to be at the dance. You know what I mean? So kind of cool.
That's dope. I love that mindset. It's that abundance mindset, that collaboration. That's like, it's not just a zero sum perspective where if I share this, that means you're going to take from me and it's come back for you, like, you know, multiple times later. I think a lot of people that are in this industry now that don't share that ethos, like, strip away some of the authenticity and like the values from like the underground to the mainstream. And it's just kind of like, I don't know. It pains me to see companies operating where just like, no, mine. I want as much market share as possible. Like, fuck you. Anybody who's not us, fuck you.
Yeah, and man, it used to be, you know, an us thing because it was a counterculture. It still is. We're still treated the same way, you know, in a large respect. Cannabis users are still marginalized every day, all over the country. Less so here, and I take it for granted sometimes. But when I go east and openly smoke, and people I know are smokers are terrified by that act, I then I'm like I'm like, wow, I forgot about that. I forgot that people might like out you at the, like, stop talking to you at the office if then you're a stoner. So we got a lot of work to do.
All right, so let's switch gears again. Tell me about how you went from being a gracious clone sharing underground grower to the concentrates. We haven't even talked about concentrates. Like, it's all been about growing. And
well, yeah. So quick to the beginning, always making hash oil from the leftovers in my Florida grow, making really, really high quality hash oil in the late 80s, early 90s in Jamaica from flower. So at an enormous scale. And it's like enormous scale that I have not done since. So always concentrates, but around 2006, I was always involved in the glass community in Colorado. That's kind of where I landed, was the grow community that I landed in, was a bunch of glass blowers. And a guy gave me a dab on a borosilicate dab rig with just the nail that he had made. And I can't remember if it had a dome or not, but I was like, whoa. And I loved oil, but I never really had messed with it more than just a little here and there. I was smoking a lot of bubble hash at the time because I love hash. But I was like, oh, that's a thing. That's the highest I've ever gotten on weed ever. And I've gotten to smoke some really cool weed. And I took it. I took the pipe with me. I was like, buddy, I'm gonna take this home. You're a glass blower. You can make yourself another one. And then a couple weeks later, he showed me wax. Somebody had showed him how to whip. And then I was like, oh, you can touch this and now package it. And at that time, dispensaries were open in Colorado. There wasn't really licensing yet, but Obama, the original memos had come out. There were lawyers holding clinics on how to open a dispensary, and it was going. So some friends of mine and I started grow in Boulder. And at the last minute, when they made regulations, we ended up with a MIP as the license. So we were the first
What's the MIP?
OPC
Just for the
infused products manufacturer. So that's allowed to make hash, edibles, whatever. But at that point, the way the regs were written was that a grow for that could only make concentrates. The flowers couldn't be sold. You had to remove the cannabinoids from the flowers and turn them into a product, which could include hash. And so that was the only license that we could land with. We literally, the 9th hour on August 13th, 2010, I think it was, we landed with these guys. Anyway, so I started doing it, and then was working on my original thing was that I wanted to freeze the plants to be able to sift them so that we could make BHO from the sift and use less butane. And it didn't really work, and I parked it. And then I later revisited it, but that was the early where I was coming at to do live resin. I was really trying to use less solvent, was the impetus of it in the beginning, because there weren't closed loop extraction, and it just wasn't a great thing.
Wait, hold on, Bill. You were making butane hash, not closed loop.
I mean,
Whew.
yeah,
Whew.
well known.
Yeah.
There weren't closed loops, and
Crazy.
literally, man, I'm a super lucky guy to be my age and not have had an accident. And you know, my earliest mentor was a chemist. We had a still in scale running hundreds of pounds in Jamaica, so I'd been with scale solvent. But no excuse for that. But it's also like America not admitting to how America became America. I mean, the hash makers that have been in the game that long, open blasted, unfortunately.
That's wild. That makes my heart rate go up thinking about it.
The emo, so I ran the second Emotech, which was the first registered closed loop BHO machine in existence. But I was in there on the very second iteration of that machine. And, you know, live resin couldn't have happened without it, because that's when the name happened. And it was something that was not doable or safe. But I was sitting there looking at that machine, talking to Giddy Up, the founder of Emotech. And I was like, hey, man, can I freeze this thing? I saw that it had a temperature rating on it. And he was like, I don't know why you would. And I explained the whole thing to him. And we talked the owner of A Cut Above into giving us some trim that he actually had frozen and he had slated to give to Nicotine. And we blasted it. And that was the first time. Didn't really work out that time. The first time it really worked was that, you know, the first runs for TR. Yeah, scientific, you know. But from the second that worked, we dropped the first batch, the very first run of live resin that came out, which was literally the second time I did it in a closed loop. We entered into the secret cup and won Connoisseur's Choice. And that was also the first time I had ever lost a garden in my life, man. It literally, live resin took my life over. My plants died.
What do you mean? What do you mean? So you just started focusing purely on?
I just had so much going on immediately from like that second. And, you know, working as a consultant in the industry, not having a badge, having an agreement with ownership that they could revoke at any second because I didn't have a badge. So I literally started working like this 50-hour workday thing that I was pretty famous for in the early days of just like working until I couldn't. And then I would go to the hotel at the end of the street, shower, sleep, and go right back to the lab. But I wouldn't even get 3 blocks away, man. They were paying me well, and it was legal tax money, and I couldn't believe that they're letting me do it. So I couldn't stop. I just literally couldn't stop. And throughout this whole thing, when it gets tough in the lab or in the garden, man, I just am like, holy shit, they're letting us do this. And then I get a big smile and back to light step and going after it, But it's not legal. They're only letting us do it. And they're more really right now letting their buddies get rich on it. But we'll get there. It's step by step by step, so.
All right. We only got a few more minutes. I'm going to open it up to the audience in just a minute here. But I have intentionally just spent more time hearing about your story than hearing about like the tricks to going from underground to above ground. Cause I think your story is just so powerful and there's so much to learn from it. But just for the people in our audience that have been operating underground, they do want to operate in, some of them want to operate in the regulated market, right? There's benefits to that. You feel a little bit more secure, probably a lot more secure. You probably don't have as high a margin, but we haven't even gotten to the part of your story where you're working for multiple different operators, right? Like you've worked for Quest, Acreage, a bunch of really, really, really solid brands have come through you. And I'm just kind of curious about like, what have you gained in doing that? And what have you lost operating in the legal game?
Great question. So I have gained the ability to sleep through the night, which literally didn't start happening for me until 2011. One thing about going through that whole experience, you hear every sound, man, for a long time. You know what I mean? You're never really at rest. There's an alertness that is traumatizing. And just from going through, imagine war, from anything like that, where your reality gets shattered in a fraction of a second and it's violent. So I gained sleep. I gained the ability to be out, and I'm out. You know what I mean? Like I don't hide anything about weed anymore. I refuse to. My kids' teachers know what I do for a living. My mom, who still doesn't get it, but she's 82, you know what I mean? And she had to read about my weed career on the front page of the newspaper for the first time. And you know what I mean? So I gained all of that. And more people are smoking better weed than ever before. It used to be like you had to know a guy. That was really a thing to even have access to something. Like some of these strains that are commonplace, like the TK or whatever, you had to know that guy for 5 years before he'd smoke that weed with you. Now anybody can smoke it. That's cool. There's not as much excellent weed because it's harder to do because of scale and price. There's no rules yet amongst the standard business rules apply, where like, man, you better pay attention because you can be taken advantage of. Contracts are only your friend if you read them and understand them, and know your stuff. I read Duff McKagan's the bass player for Guns N' Roses biography, and he was like, man, the only reason why I have any money and all these other, most of my buddies don't, is he's like, I learned everything I could about the business side of this. And so that I could understand and navigate that. And a lot of cannabis veterans will complain that the business side and the money side doesn't understand cannabis, which is true. But as a veteran, coming into the business world. We're actually coming into their world with our thing, and it's on us to be able to show up and master a office suite on a computer, be on time and do normal rules of business and respond to emails, all the stuff that can be really a challenge for somebody who's not had to answer to anybody. I'll say that's the thing. And just keep showing up, man. They told me to go home at Mindful. The CEO told me to go home. And then the other two owners were like, just don't let her see you here. And I was like, cool. And I kept coming. You know what I mean? So just keep coming. And then the last thing, and this is important because they're, to me, and I have no problem with black market. I have no problem with gray market. And I have no problem with the regulated market. But if you're in a license, in a regulated market, do yourself a favor, follow the rules 100%, be ahead of them in compliance all the way. And that is where I've won. I know compliance. I've stayed on it. I've been ahead of it. And when there's ever been anything that was weird, I engaged whoever that regulatory body was or whoever I needed to immediately with 100% transparency and had documentation, which sounds like boring stuff, right? But that's the real. And you have some luck, keep showing up, follow the rules. You got a chance, you know?
Yeah, I think just knowing you and in hearing your story, those things resonate so well to me because it's like, I know none of that came natural to you. You built skills for 20, 30 years, and then you had to learn these new skills to play the game by the rules. And I want to echo that. If you're not going to play by the rules, don't even try.
Don't
right?
bother.
You might as well keep a solid operation underground and not pay taxes. If you're going to do it halfway, you're worse off.
Yeah, I would agree. Early friends in medical in Colorado who didn't quite figure out how to do it right in the beginning were like, damn, this is the best way in the world to knock zeros off your net worth that I've ever found. Like trying to quasi be legal will just make you impoverished. And you know what I mean? There's a willingness to be able to have money that you get to keep and spend and be part of your community and hold your head up high in that way. Not that them saying it's okay is makes it okay, but it sure is nice to know they're not going to take your money and to get a tax return and to not have to lie about anything in my life anymore. Like, you know, being a weed grower means you're a liar in an underground world. And I didn't like that at all. I didn't like having to lie about where I was going, what I was doing, not telling people's travel plans, all the things. So that's a lot of gifts of a new freedom.
Wrap up. I do want to bring in at least one of the people from our Kim, or I'm sorry, I'll let you pronounce your name if I got it wrong. I'm going to ask you to come up here. Let's see here.
So is Jacoby stuck?
Yeah, I think Jacoby's stuck.
Hold on, let me see if I can get. There she goes.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
I can.
Well, first I want to say I'm so grateful to hear your story because I absolutely did not know that was happening. And the fact that, and if I could be very transparent, because I feel like we're all friends on this line, the fact that you're a white guy that had these experiences is God-smacking to me. My question, Bill, is I'm a cannabis accountant, and sometimes the conversations around 280E is difficult because people can't wrap their heads around, having to pay at least 70% of federal taxes. How did in the early stages, how did you deal with taxes and accounting and bookkeeping?
Huge challenge. And I really didn't know what to do and where to turn to, and my lack of trust and all of the things got me in quite a bunch of, I have a pretty decent tax bill that I'm making a payment on every month. I'll be honest with you. I didn't know how to do it. And I think one of the coolest things about the equity programs and things that are going on is access to accounting. But so 280E doesn't affect consulting, because I don't have the kind of write-offs and things that really kill you in a retail situation. And the early people navigated 280E through real estate, which is kind of why the access has been so tough. It's really hard to make money in a retail situation that you don't own the real estate on, I think. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
You answered my question. So as an accountant in this space, is there any type of tips that you can give me to help your people that are going in and help them understand the consequences when it comes to accounting and taxes and just keeping good records?
You have got to be meticulous with your taxes above and beyond the way any normal business would be. All of the groups that I've worked with have been audited at one point or another, that have been in business long enough to have been audited. And you really have to be making all of your decisions based on how 280 will affect you as an owner, for sure. And that's something that you can advise them on more correctly than I can. But knowing how to grow, sell, package, market cannabis has nothing to do with knowing how to get to keep any of that money because of the tax structure. And it's really tenuous for smaller groups that don't have ways like real estate to be able to go through the taxes.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. That 280E is a bitch. Like it sucks if you're in cannabis. I'll just go ahead and say it. I don't know what city or state you're in, but let's definitely connect after. With everything that's going on the East Coast, especially in New York and New Jersey, a little bit of Pennsylvania and everything over there. We have a ton of people in our community that are ramping up, right? From really small businesses that want to be co-ops and craft licenses to some people in our network that are going for, big manufacturing licenses in like upstate New York. And they're all looking for all of the professional services that are going to help them be successful. And something about people on the East Coast, more than any place I've ever been, is you want people from your neighborhood. You want people that you can trust. You want people that have been here that are authentic. And so happy to connect you with groups as they start to come through our community. But taxes is probably one of the most important. Taxes and accounting in general are one of the most important things for groups that have been doing it all on their own in cash for so long. That's a tough learning curve. So there's a ton of value I'm sure you could bring.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're actually in the Bronx.
Oh, let's go.
Yes.
I want to also interject that it would also be helpful for you to have your clients structure their companies in ways where, for example, on the machine side, it's a completely separate company where you're basically leasing the machines for your cannabis to plant touching thing. So there's different types of things you can do, but trying to keep everything non-plant touching that isn't plant touching in your operation as a completely different entity will be very helpful, because since it's not plant touching, those 280E laws are not applicable. They're like normal business. So
Right. The pick and shovel plays are definitely going to be where the biggest runs are, especially on the East Coast.
Yep.
I have a question for you, Bill.
Okay.
So you've seen the underground market, you've seen the gray market, you've seen the legal market. What are some characteristics of groups that you think, like of the successful ones across all different markets? What are some of the characteristics that you've seen that you know, like this group is going to be successful in what they do?
So passion for the plant combined with some business know-how, that there's definitely, and even black market, the guys that I ran with, they had Excel then. It was not, this is not, tight ship. It goes a long way, right? So but when people care about their employees, their customers, their plants, their community in a full spectrum way, like, to me, that's what full spectrum is, right? Is like hitting it on every way that you can find a way to hit, and be in that constant life cycle improvement of, hey, how can we do this better tomorrow? And focusing on getting base runs every day, rather than trying to hit home runs, right? If you get everybody in play, take care of your people are stoked to come to the workplace. You set a super high standard for how the product's handled, no matter the price point. If you honor the product correctly, there's a whole thing that channels through to the end user, in my experience, that's real and tenable. And people like can pull fake brands out that are insincere pretty quickly. And even with sincere people behind them, they don't land the same way. No, I don't know. Did that answer that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, as East Coast comes on board, there's just going to be a lot more like money brands coming in, and money corporations coming in. So I guess, for our audience, who are trying to get into the industry on the legal side, the question was related to like, what should they be looking for?
Right. So
should they be?
It's a choice with the way the East Coast is coming on. 98% of the players coming into this are looking at exit already, and they're not in. Okay. So are you, as your business, looking to take a ride and go on an exit? That means a lot of different things, but that means that you're going to play with money guys and be working in a pro forma world, 100% different expectation. And if you want to be a legacy player in 20 years as a craft person, then my highest recommendation is to focus on organic growth, take the least amount of money that you have to raise to get in the game, be lean, care about your product and your people, keep people, don't let there be turnover be the reason why your weed sucks. I can't emphasize how much it has to do with the relationships of the people growing this cannabis and the entity. Yeah, that would be that is how I'm moving forward. I've done big, small, medium, and now I really look forward to a really small operation that I can affect on a daily basis and really eke little bits of quality out here and there and try to set a standard.
I mean, I think it's just super impressive that you've created over 200 SKUs of products in over 21 markets. are you taking, are you consulting? Are you open to working with different groups still?
I am, and I have for the last 8 months just been kind of home, really. One of the costs of this industry for me personally has been like my kids are grown up. They're not 2 and 5, they're 13 and 9, and I missed it. I missed it. And so I've been trying to make up a little ground and find a way to be here with them every day, but still be in industry. And I got something up my sleeve for Colorado that's coming. And hope to be participating in some things in California that will be some equity focused media and things, just getting attention to that. Hey, there are legacy people out here who are second, third generation that are behind some of these things that you might not know about. And yeah, so that's kind of what I got going. And I'm looking forward to.
Love it, Bill. My guy, I appreciate you making the time to
Thanks, guys.
come with us. Yeah, it was really great to hear your story. Like I said, I've known you for a bit, so I've known about your story. I even had a prep meeting with you, so I knew a little bit more about your story. And today I still learned more about it, and it's just so impactful, and I'm glad you were able to share it with us.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. The Instagram is @kind Bill, right?
Yep.
All right, some tricks up his sleeve for the future.
It's coming.
Sorry. Lulu, what's up?
I said
Yeah,
something's coming.
Well, I wanted to drop in for Corvain Cooper, the GoFundMe page. So
Yeah.
if people have an opportunity, please just donate. And then really excited for next week's episode for Chronicles from the Underground. We're going to be featuring 6 men. So if you like High Maintenance, the show, we have an OG, a bicycle delivery from Chicago and New York City, who's going to be sharing his story. So hope to see you next week. Thank you.
Hell yeah. Thank you, everybody, for joining on Zoom and on YouTube. Bill, once again, we appreciate you. On that note, everybody, peace. Oscar, it's all you.